Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another video. As you can tell, it's another literature review. And as you can also tell, new angle. I decided that, since I'm using a tripod, I'm just going to set it up on the floor, but only used two of the extensions, not the full third, or else the angle would be a little bit higher and a little bit more level. I like the angle, this angle. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what this would be considered. I believe this would be considered a low angle, tilted upward. It's not bird's eye because the camera would have to be, if I'm facing from there, it'd have to be over there, or it'd have to be hanging from my light technically if you're to be a bird's eye by the technical definition. But who's going with the technical definitions on this thing? Anyway, today's review is of a book, that is connected to a film. And I've read this book once before, but it's been a couple years, and I was going through books over there that I should be reading, and I'm like, oh, what the heck. It took me a couple days to get through it. It, of course, is 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke in collaboration with director Stanley Kubrick. Now, most people would assume that this is a novelization of the classic Kubrick film, but that's actually not the case. And it's not also the case that the film is based on the novel. In fact, they're more companion pieces because they were created about the same time. It was from a collaboration between Clarke and Kubrick where they got together and decided to make the proverbial good science fiction movie. So they worked together. Clarke worked on the novel, Kubrick worked on the film, and they threw ideas back and forth, each inspiring the other and changing stuff. Now, there are differences in that. Some of them coming down, of course, to the main difference between writing a novel and making a film. And that is scope, and also stuff that's easier to suggest in film, or having to, come out and say some stuff in the book. And it's going to be a matter of preference for certain things, mainly the nature of the aliens in the story. Now, a minor difference is, of course, Saturn here, Jupiter in the film. That was a special effects call there. They couldn't get the rings to look right, for at least for another couple years. Now, what's to say about the book? Well, it's well written. Clarke is an excellent writer. I have to get into some of his other work so I can say how he is outside of this. He gets the technical jargon down, the radio calls, explaining everything. His use of words to describe things is excellent, so his vocabulary is top-notch. There was a couple words in there I didn't recognize. I wish I wrote them down so I can at least Google what their definitions are, but it's like, alright, I think I can get the gist of what he's saying with that. I might go through it again and see if I can find some of the words. I wish I had highlighted them, but, don't have a highlighter on me. If I would say the main difference between the book and the movie, and I've kind of hinted at it a little bit already, is that stuff that Kubrick keeps cryptic in the film, or abridges how it's told, it's gone into more depth here. Every part, the opening, the whole thing with the monolith on the moon, little pieces on Discovery, and even stuff towards the end. I mean, he really drags out when David Bowman goes through the quote-unquote Stargate. That's what they call it in the book, a Stargate. I know this is this is decades before the movie Stargate came out, but they're used for the same principle, traveling from one area of space to another using the whole wormhole theory. Well, they expand on that a lot. I mean, Dave sees a lot. He doesn't just go through the Stargate and end up in the room. He sees stars and all that, which would have been interesting to see how Kubrick would have put that on film, but I can imagine Kubrick going, nope, we're going straight there. I mentioned the whole Jupiter thing already. There's a lot of it superficial. I mean, there's a video out there already called What's the Difference, that goes into every single little superficial difference. It's a two-parter too. Of course, one thing I will mention is that we actually do get a little bit of the viewpoint of one of the apes from the beginning of the film. That's Moonwatcher, the lead one. The one that ends up killing the tapir with the bone, basically. And also ends up committing the first murder when he offs one of the other apes. The whole thing with the leopard we see in the film is expanded on a little bit, which makes sense. Apparently the apes were heading towards extinction before the monolith interferes in the book, so that's a nice little thing to know. But the movie hints at that enough. I mean, the whole water being scarce and the two tribes fighting over water, othering at its finest. And then, of course, the transition from ape to man is a lot different in the book because you can't be as abrupt as that in a book. Well, you could, but it wouldn't come off as well. I mean, Clarke has to have a whole thing where he's explaining man's transition from damn dirty ape to civilized ape, and he does a pretty good job. It's about a chapter, like it's a pretty small chapter, but it works, and I do like how it ends. I'm actually going to read this part. If it wasn't for the Star Child, there would have been a nuclear war, but that's another thing entirely. That's one minor difference. The film only hints at some of the stuff there, like overpopulation, humans trying to find alternatives to food, which kind of also makes me think of Soylent Green. Soylent Green is people! In their alternative food sources. It's kind of a topical thing now, because what are we at? Like, what, 7, almost 8 billion people? And going up? I'm not even going to go in another thought there, because that'd be a little too dark here. The scenes on Discovery, obviously, since it has a little bit more room to work with, Clarke does describe a lot of the mundane tasks that the crew have to go through, describing how our two awake crew, how they switch off every 12 hours, their mundane tasks of eating, talking with Hal, until it leads up to Hal's mistake. It also goes into Hal's reason for his psychotic episode a lot more than the movie, and it's a tick that's kind of hinted at in the film, but since it's a book, they're going to spell it out a little bit more, and it doesn't have that quick transition like the movie does once he's disconnected. He's disconnected in the same way, but it's hard to say if it's creepier when you're reading it or when you actually hear it. I'd say it's a little creepier hearing it, mainly because of the actor that got to voice Hal, and how they slowly do the thing where he's shutting down. It's like, ooh. But it's also a little creepy because you can make Hal sound like whatever you want in the book. But since I saw the movie first, I always envisioned him sounding just like the actor who voices him in the film. Of course, there's some minor superficial differences there too, which I'm not going to spoil. If you want to know what they are, either watch the video I mentioned before or get the book, read it, and then watch the movie, and you'll notice them. The things with Saturn, other than it being a special effects change in the film, there's not really a major difference. The only difference, I would say, is that they actually have to go around Jupiter first before they get to Saturn. You build up a little bit more speed and also do some scientific research, which that would have been an interesting scene to see in the film, but granted, in the scheme of things, it's kind of unneeded, so I don't think Kubrick would have used it if he had kept Saturn as the destination in the film. But it's a nice little read scene. It shows a little bit of Clarke's scientific know-how, or at least scientific know-how for how things were known back in the 60s. Of course, some of it, like using one planet as a loop around to go further out, that is something that we'll probably end up using if we ever get around to solar system travel. The whole thing with a monolith, it's dealt a little bit more with in the book, obviously, because it's a novel, so you have more room to work with. and of course talking a little bit about the species that built them and what their focus is. Obviously, the film is going to be a little bit more vague than the book, but it's one of those things. It's one of those things. Taste and preference. Do you want everything spelled out for you, or do you want it to be more vague so it raises more questions? I mean, that was one of their point, as they told some. I don't remember if it was critics or if it was casual moviegoers at one screening that was like, "Yeah, this movie's too confusing." That was what we intended. We intended to raise more questions than we answered, and if you did not get that sensation, we believe we failed. I don't remember if it was Clarke or Kubrick who said that, but I'm tending to think it was Kubrick. And as I said earlier, it is a companion piece to the film, and when you read it, that's definitely what it feels like. It's one of those things that you technically can read the book without having seen the film, just as you can watch the film without reading the book. But it's when you do both, you get the whole picture. It's one of those weird things. I guess you say it's kind of the same thing of when someone will say you should probably read a book that's being turned into a movie before you see the movie, especially if it's a series, in case there's some things that don't make sense or they don't explain very well. Then you're like, oh, that's why they abridged it. But with this, it's in that field, but it's a little bit different because unlike an adaptation, these were made together, so it's like one Jing and one Zhang, if that makes any sense. And as you can already tell, film, well, the film comes with my recommendation, but the book also comes with my recommendation. And if you can read it and then watch the film in approximately the same time frame, do it.